Hi coaches, this is my opening statement on behalf of the defendant, Big A Utility. Members of the jury, good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Marcy West, and together with my co-counsel, Deborah Johnson, we appear on behalf of the defendant in this case, Big A Utility. This is a case about taking risks. On October 31st, 2004, Andy Little took risks, which unfortunately took his life. I want to start out by extending our sincere condolences to Lisa Richardson and her son for the tragic loss that they have suffered. And I also want to note to you that we are not here to place any moral blame on Andy Little and his actions on that night. So let's go back to Halloween night 2004. You'll hear that on that night, Andy Little is at home with Lisa Richardson, and he's had a beer when he tells her around 9 p.m. that he's going to go buy some smokes. But you'll hear that that's not exactly what Andy Little does. Because around 9:30 p.m., Andy Little goes to the Buffalo Chip near the Laidlaw Cemetery, and he buys more beer. He buys a six-pack. And 2 hours after that, that puts us at about 11:30 p.m., Andy Little is driving near the Laidlaw Cemetery. And for those of you that are familiar, this is on the South Access Road and Highway 13. And you'll hear that Andy Little is driving his vehicle with alcohol between his legs. You'll also hear that he's driving without his headlights. On that same night, there happens to be a power outage. So Big A Utility sends Dana Mylanta and her crew to fix the problem. Dana Mylanta is one of Big A's most trusted employees. She's worked there for over 15 years, and she's driving a bucket truck. Some of you might be asking what a bucket truck is. Well, it's about the size of a rental U-Haul, and it's got these big buckets on the back of it so that people can get in, reach the power line, take care of the issue. You'll also hear that Dana Mylanta and her crew are using spotlights to look for the transformer pole and fix the broken fuse and fix that power outage. Around 11:30 p.m., there comes a point when Dana Mylanta needs to back out of the cemetery and continue south on the access road. You'll hear her testify today that as she's driving, before she backs up, she looks both ways. She doesn't see any cars coming, neither do the two passengers, her crew. And she starts to back up slowly. She puts the car in drive, and she heads forward. Andy Little comes barreling down and hits her from behind. Dana Mylanta and her crew immediately get out, check on the car that hit them, and they call 911. Now at this point, Denny Shepard arrives on the scene. The plaintiff will call Denny Shepard today, and he's going to tell you that Dana Mylanta caused this accident. But members of the jury, you will hear that Denny Shepard's investigation was seriously flawed. And you'll also hear that this wasn't his first run-in with Big A. Years ago, you'll hear that Denny Shepard failed to pay his utility bill, and Big A ultimately had to turn his power off. We, on the other hand, we're going to call Joe Mitchell to testify. And he wasn't at the scene on Halloween night, but he is a professional accident reconstructionist. He has over 20 years of experience, and in fact, he's testified as an expert in dozens of these cases. Joe Mitchell will tell you that based on his investigation and his review of the materials, that Andy Little's risks, his drinking and his driving, ultimately caused this accident. So that's what you're going to hear today. Now, briefly, I want to speak to you a little bit about trial procedure. The judge will give you the complete instructions, but I want to emphasize that the plaintiff has filed this claim against Big A Utility. In other words, they have sued my client. And because the plaintiff is the party bringing this claim, it is the plaintiff's burden to prove to you that Dana Mylanta, and therefore her employer, Big A, negligently caused this accident. In other words, it is not our burden to disprove that to you. Therefore, if the plaintiff does not prove to you today that Dana Mylanta negligently caused the accident, members of the jury, you must find for Big A Utility. And furthermore, Big A maintains that Andy Little negligently caused this accident. Assuming we prove that to you, again, you must find in favor of Big A. Because ultimately, this case is about taking risks. And unfortunately, Andy Little's risks took his life. Thank you for your time and your attention.